Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles constitutional and legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumile Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by calling us on 011-714-5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights and Recourse. Alternatively, email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. I swear solemnly that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other laws of the Republic. And I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a member of the National Assembly to the best of my ability, so help me God. As Chief Justice Mogoeng emphasized, there is no constitutional reference to loyalty to a political party. Central to the freedom to follow the dictates of personal conscience is the oath of office. A conscience vote allows MPs to act independently according to the dictates of their morality without being forced to toe the line of the party. This is an extract from an article in the Daily Maverick by Professor Brij Maharaj. Today on Rights and Recourse, we examine by way of a post-mortem the vote of no confidence in the President in Parliament on Tuesday. But first, let's take a look at this insert.
The President's failure to comply with the remedial action taken against him by the Public Protector is inconsistent with his obligations to uphold, defend and respect the Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, to comply with the remedial action taken by the Public Protector and the duty to assist and protect the office of the Public Protector so as to ensure its independence, impartiality, dignity and effectiveness. Similarly, the failure by the National Assembly to hold the President accountable by ensuring that he complies with the remedial action taken against him is inconsistent with its obligations to scrutinize and oversee executive action and to maintain oversight of the exercise of executive powers by the President, and in particular to give urgent attention to or intervene by facilitating his compliance with the remedial action.
To discuss today's topic, we are joined in the studio by Dr. Somadora Figene, a political analyst, and from our Cape Town studio by Ms. Pepelani Dube, Director, Center for Constitutional Rights, and lastly from our Durban studio, we are joined by Ronesh Dowraj, SABC Specialist Political Researcher. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Let me start with you, Ms. Dube. My introduction that I read earlier regarding the oath by members of Parliament, there seems to be a discussion in the ANC that members of Parliament should pay allegiance to the party rather than to the Constitution. And me and you have a different view.
Indeed, you are quite right in pointing that out, and I think for me the interesting thing is the fact that the Chief Justice did point out the fact that members of Parliament are first of all beholden to the Constitution before they're beholden to their party bosses. But a point that I would like to make in this instance is the fact that the Constitution itself, in I think section 47 subsection 3c, points out the fact that in order for you to remain a member of Parliament, you have to belong to a political party. And then if we also consider the fact that in the motion of no confidence against the President, if it's passed successfully, it removes members of Cabinet, the Deputy President, as well as the President. And yet, some of the members of Cabinet are also members of the National Assembly. So in that sense, it makes it very difficult for members of Cabinet to, in essence, vote against their own interests. So I think it's these two particular constitutional provisions which, in a sense, create loyalty first of all to parties rather than the Constitution. I mean, I'm not really one for amending the Constitution, because I think once that box is opened, then it's very difficult to close it again. But it certainly should be a subject that we as a nation should be talking about. The fact that we have a constitution which appears to make members of parliament loyal first to their political parties rather than the constitution itself.
Why do we insist? I think Pepelani Drew spoke about section 47 3C, I think, yes, 47 3C. And the ANC seems to be holding on this part that members of parliament are first beholden to the party rather than to the constitution.
In a constitutional democracy, it is assumed that parties and their values are in line with the constitution. So belonging to the party does not presume that you are at variance with the constitutional values as such. So that is, to me, the key thing and the dilemma for the ANC. Initially, ANC values at face value, just like other parties, do seek to promote, to uphold the constitution until such time that the leader of the party becomes the primary focus for defense rather than the values of the party. Instead of the leader aligning himself to the values of the party, which are actually fine, then when the party start wanting to align to the leader, that's where the tension is, because the assumption was that no party and no values, no principles would be at variance with the constitution.
Ronesh, down in Durban, this was the 8th, somebody made the analogy over the week and said this is the 8th vote of no confidence against the president on the 8th of August, on the 8th month, and somebody said something might give, and we didn't see that happening.
No, absolutely. You know, lots of people, especially when it comes down to politics, that, you know, they like looking at the numbers. Obviously, we know, you know, what happened. There was a difference of 21 votes that actually separated, you know, people who actually voted for the for the motion of no confidence, you know, compared to people who actually supported it, 198 to 177. But obviously, the big question is, again, looking at those MPs, you know, lots of estimates or guesstimates, you know, between 25 and as much as 42 MPs who either abstained or actually sided with the opposition in this motion of no confidence. Yes, this was the 8th motion of no confidence brought against the ANC president, Jacob Zuma. But you also got to factor in, you know, President Zuma also came under fire within the ANC, you know, within the National Working Committee of the ANC, especially more importantly within the National Executive Committee of the party. And within that body, which is the highest decision-making body between conferences, I think there was no less than 3 motions of no confidence brought against Jacob Zuma. But I think, you know, lots of permutations regarding what exactly happened on Tuesday. You know why this groundswell of support, this rallying behind the president. You know, why is he so powerful? And lots of other assertions made about why, you know, Jacob Zuma is this strong, and you know, that amount of MPs within the ANC caucus that actually supported him. But you know, obviously we are going to watch what's going to transpire in December. We all know that he has said numerous times that he will be stepping down from the ANC presidency. But my you know, big attention and big focus is actually going to be between the December conference and exactly what happens you know, before the 2019 elections, because I highly suspect that he will survive, you know, that full term until 2019.
I want to come back. I'm going to refer all constitutional questions to you, Ms. Dube. My apologies for that, but I want to come back to something you raised. You raised section 47 3C, and also we quoted the oath of office of the MPs. The question I have there is, what takes precedence? Is it section 47 3C or is it the oath of office?
Well, first of all, we need to bear in mind Section 2 of the Constitution, which basically says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And of course, it then follows that that members of parliament are first of all beholden to the constitution, and bearing in mind that their oath of office basically enjoins them, it enjoins them to being custodians of the constitution. So I would argue in that instance that obviously it's the oath of office that takes precedence. But of course at the same time we need to understand the nature of our constitution. You know, the very fact that it is a negotiated document, I think we see elements of those negotiation processes all throughout the constitution. You know, just for an example, you know, the property clause, which both protects property rights as well as ensures that there's land reform. But then we also see it in section 47(3)(c), in that, of course, at the time that the constitution was adopted, you know, during the CODESA talks, South Africa was in a very volatile situation, and it was important to meet, you know, the varying demands of the political parties that were being represented across the spectrum. So it was also important to ensure that our democracy was solidified and that it was a stable democracy. So in a sense, that is a compromise provision which made it difficult for members of political parties to move across political parties. So it solidified the positions of the different political parties. And in a sense, it was just an attempt to create a more stable democracy. And that was important then. But 23 years into our democracy, perhaps these are the kind of questions we need to start asking ourselves. I think our democracy has more or less stood a lot of tensions. It has, you know, stood the test of time. So perhaps we don't need that provision anymore. And I think it's a conversation that we need to get started as a nation.
Professor Somato Dafigeni, the issues raised by this constitutionality, why does the ANC insist that members should pay allegiance to the ANC rather than to the Constitution? An organization that we have known over the years has been an organization that is built around the Constitution. Has it abandoned constitutionalism?
I do think that it's just a dilemma and practical realities of ANC politics. They find themselves in a deeply factionalized environment. The prospects of the party rupturing and splitting after the president has been removed and he remains the president of the party, he still calls the shot as to who succeeds him, who is appointed to the cabinet, was just too much for the party. And it is for that reason that most of the reasons advanced, even during the debate in Parliament, were not in defense of the president. They were in defense of the party and certain general principles of a party system, because they could not defend blow by blow the issues that had brought the vote of no confidence, but they were still interested in the party unity, and they could see December close enough to sort themselves out and to stabilize the party instead of it rupturing. So it's not the vote for the president nor the support for the president that mattered, including parties or the role players such as the SACP COSATU, who had wanted the president to step down. At this moment of a dilemma, they knew that they had to save the ANC.
Well, if you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us 011-714-5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Recourse. Alternatively, you can send us an email to rightsrecourse@sabc.co.za. When we come back, we'll take a look at the vote of no confidence that took place through a secret ballot. Stay with us.
Recession since 2009.
Currency has appreciated, quite a lot, especially for this year, and it has benefited from a number of things. Not so much to do with what was happening here at home.
The Islamic State-linked news agency AMAC claims the latest attack was launched because of Australia's backing in the US fight against the group.
Constad is one of the dozens of women who have accused Cosby of sexual assault, but hers is the only case recent enough to be subjected to criminal prosecution.
Stay tuned to News Today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
And mindful of the fact that this decision is not setting a precedent, I therefore determine that voting on the motion of no confidence in the President on the 8th of August 2017 will be by secret ballot.
Well, that is the Speaker of Parliament announcing there that the voting would be by secret ballot. The question I want to ask the three of you is, how important was the secret ballot in this case for this vote of no confidence? And secondly, was this a precedence?
Well, I do think that it was a precedent, even though the Speaker was careful to say it's not a precedent. The logic advanced by the Constitutional Court Chief Justice as to why this ought to be the case comes against the backdrop of all possible intimidations from within the parties. And you see this in the municipalities, you see this in the provincial, you see this nationally. It will be very difficult not to consider this as a precedent unless there was a superior logic more than this particular one. But it's also a balancing act, because if you don't balance and know that our politics are so much vulnerable to money and the corruption that comes with it, that people may start exchanging money, they start buying each other, they start promising this one to be an ambassador and so forth, then you start seeing things happening. So it ought to be made criminal that you could be given money or any other indirect benefit for you to vote, but at the same time it ought to be okay that you vote by conscience without repercussions, as long as you can demonstrate that this was in the public good or it was in line with the Constitution.
Ranesh, somebody who has said through press conferences in the past and in your life now, it seemed very much there that the Speaker was reading a legal opinion rather than reading a press statement.
No, absolutely, and that's the impression that we all got, because when she made that fateful announcement, and just before that announcement was made, she very strategically, just to quote her, she was interrupted by this horrible cough, and everybody just waited with bated breath, no pun intended. Yeah, so we are all terribly surprised that it was a secret ballot, because everybody expected, that the EFF had its lawyers at the High Court just to challenge, the notion of it being an open ballot, and this possibly going in an altogether different direction. So we were all terribly taken by surprise when she did announce that it was by secret ballot. But just to concur with what Professor Fikeni said earlier, I also think that the secret ballot did create a precedent, and just to recap, the first secret ballot was actually held in 2014 when the very own Speaker Baleka Mbete where she was challenged by the DA's Nosimo Balindlela, who also originated from the ANC, by the way. She was premier under the Mbeki administration in the Eastern Cape. But the first presidential secret ballot was actually in 2009, when President Jacob Zuma, faced his first challenge for ANC president. And obviously we know that the ANC has the numbers. He was challenged by the by COPE's Reverend Mvume Dandlala. So obviously Jacob Zuma won that vote. I think it was by 277 to 47 votes. But yes, this was a precedent in the making.
Ms. Dube, the one thing the ANC MPs were raising during the debate was that what kind of transparency is this that is done through a secret ballot? Isn't that a contradiction in terms?
You are quite right to point that, because in terms of the Constitution, one of our foundational values is transparency, accountability, and openness. And also, if you consider the very fact that in terms of the Constitution, Parliament's most important job is to ensure accountability by the executive and as well as organs of state. So I think in a sense, even if the Speaker of Parliament had said that in the interests of transparency and accountability that the motion of no confidence wouldn't be by a secret ballot, I think arguably there might have been very good grounds for her to do so. But of course, as we know that certain members of parliament, notably Dr. Makosi Khoza, had already started receiving threats. And also just bearing in mind what the Chief Justice had said, the fact that, despite the threats, but the fact that members of Parliament were also beholden to the Constitution and that they had sworn this oath. So it really would have been inconsequential what the party position would have been, but the dictates of the Constitution would have demanded that there be accountability and transparency.
Professor Sobadoda, we've seen this caucus in the ANC taking a very different route after the arrival of Mr. Jackson Tembu in Parliament and holding the executive to account. But in this case, is there a change from what you've seen? We've seen the investigation into the SABC, we've seen the intended investigation into ESCOM, and is there a change?
There's no change at all. As I was explaining, the dilemma now was an existential one. The party was facing a possibility of a rupture and unraveling. If a scenario where the president was removed and he suddenly says no to Ramaphosa taking over, no to any other name that they were not happy with, and also no to any cabinet members that they were not happy with, and the other side saying no, you can't do that, and that will have actually speeded up the unraveling of the ANC. So the members came together to say, let's put our heads together, let's wait until December, and also the political pride, let this not be initiated by the opposition party, because it will give the momentum to 2019. But going back, you'll still see the same parliament holding the executive to account, and that in itself, if you notice, became more apparent after the Nkandla judgment, which actually was quite scathing about the parliament itself. But also it's an indication of the balance of forces within the ANC caucus shifting away from being used as a shield to defend the executive, to defend the SOCs, which are actually, sometimes committing mistakes as if they are on steroids.
Let's take this call from Mondli from KwaZulu-Natal. Mondli, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Sikona unjani?
Ngiyaphila ngibingelele nomhlonishwa lapho baba uMhlazi nabanye abasistudio. Ngithi angicacise la mayelana ne-vote of no confidence kumongameli. Those people abafana noMakosi Khoza and nabanye abaningi, labantu singababiza ngama-sell out because bazise into yokuqala, you can't be there at parliament without an organization, and you can't fight and ube weak with an opposite party. That people, they must bathathele inyathelo ezinqala. Ngikhuluma njengelunga ka-ANC elikwi-branch ku-Ward 15. You see.
Siyabonga Mondli, sikuzwile uthe the Mondli says there that the members of parliament who voted with the motion should be disciplined by the ANC. But let's take this other call from David from Cape Town. David, good afternoon. In Johannesburg. Oh, David, you are in Johannesburg, I'm told.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking my call, and greetings to your guest.
Thank you.
Yes, my problem is one, about the secret vote. I am not a member of ANC, for the record. I'm an Africanist myself. I have an objection with the secret vote, in the sense that when we voted in the elections, it was my individual mandate to choose and my secret business. Then I chose somebody to be an executive on my behalf who must take a decision on my behalf, and that should be transparent for me to see in the manner in which they voted. Now, the parliament acted illegally by promoting corruption, whereby people can be bribed to take a decision against the mandate of the people that sent them to the parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. David making a very strong point there, probably something that we should correct, because he has no evidence that people were bribed. But I want to come to the two that's taken us exactly where we wanted to be. The question of those members of the ANC who voted with the opposition. What is wrong in a democracy to vote with the SABC if your conscience tells you, I agree with this stance?
There's nothing wrong, really. What many people do not realize is that political party has certain values. What happened to the leaders when they abandoned those values? Because it's grounded on the values, not on the individuals. If they can demonstrate that by doing A, B, or C, you have actually abandoned the values of the party and nothing happens within the party to correct itself, that in itself lends itself to the opposition forces. Most of these are ANC self-inflicted wounds. Had they dealt with the issue of state capture themselves, had they dealt with the issue of inconsistent application of discipline, had they dealt with the issues around the president, there would not even be a need for the marches, for any other thing. Can you imagine President Luthuli, President O.R. Tambo or Mandela having to deal with the leaks on the state capture and saying nothing, and the party having to be rallied just to defend, sometimes even say things such as, we have smaller nyana skeletons? At that moment, the party ought to have said, you are implicating every one of us when you say smaller nyana skeletons, because you are saying, let's not say something because each one of us is corrupted.
Well, the president himself said he knows about other people who are involved in corruption.
Again, can you imagine a situation, the head of state says, I know something wrong going, but I won't tell you until I retire and write a book. When the law says you become an accomplice by knowing something wrong and not reporting it.
I'll come to you, Runesh and Ms. Dube, but I want to take this call from Joseph. Joseph, from are you in Johannesburg? In Gauteng?
Yes, in Fortville.
Yes, Joseph, go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
My problem, where is the law enforcement in the country? When the corrupt people every day run the parliament, where the policies? All the people that belong to the ANC are stealing every day, including the president. He's the president of the country, but he's pitched that more than anybody in the country. Where's the policies? Where's the scorpion? Where's the hawks?
Well, the Scorpions are gone. Thank you, Joseph. We'll come back to your question, and I just want to go back to Ms. Dube. Ms. Dube, one of the things I normally say on this program is that we do not, we do not appreciate the fact that we are a constitutional democracy. We tend to make these comments across this whole issue of constitutionalism, and yet we don't understand that because we are a constitutional democracy, nothing can be done under the table. Everything must be, as our word, the capital T, transparent.
Yes, indeed, you're quite right in pointing that out, because as I mentioned earlier, our foundational values are transparency, openness, and accountability. And on that point, and it's something that Professor Figeni raised earlier, but it's just important to bear in mind that party political values can be in line with the Constitution, and requiring members of Parliament to act in line with their party political lines can very much be a matter which is well within the realms of the Constitution. Of course, the question arises when a party's political values are not aligned with the Constitution. Then in that instance, it's quite simple. Well, simple enough from a legal perspective, in the sense that it's obvious that members of Parliament owe their first duty to the Constitution rather than the specific party political line. But which also brings me really to my final point in this. We should perhaps reconsider our electoral system, in the sense that we've got this closed party list, and in a sense it makes it very difficult for parties, even within themselves as a political body, to have a sense of accountability. So I think that's where the problem lies, and I think right now we find ourselves being faced with that problem, in the sense that, if I must be crude about it, but the fact that you have the governing party having voted the president into power, and it stands to reason that these are the very same people who should be taking him out of power. And given the fact that the secret ballot spectacularly failed, I think it very much behoves us as a nation to then start considering what happens within political parties. We need to be applying, a microscopic lens to political parties and their practices, and asking ourselves whether their rules and their practices are in line with constitutional values. Because I think right now they are very much wanting, and right now the fact that we cannot hold this one person accountable, the essence of it comes down to the fact that there is also very little accountability and democracy within party politics.
Ramesh, the ANC normally prides itself about internal democracy, talking about internal democracy. Even before the Constitutional Court ruled for a secret ballot and the Speaker agreeing that she will have a secret ballot, there were threats out of KwaZulu-Natal, where you are, around Dr. Makosi Khoza. I don't know whether you heard me.
Absolutely, but to me, yes, I did. I think there's a slight delay between KZN and the Joburg studios. But absolutely, I absolutely agree with you. But before I answer your question, I just want to go back to what our Constitutional Court, constitutional experts from Cape Town has just mentioned. I also think that there is a problem, well, not a problem, but a concern regarding our electoral system. In 2002, the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission found that our electoral system was wanting, and he made recommendations that it actually should change and encompass more of a mixed electoral system that we kind of see at local government level. And that's why we see more accountability at local government level. We saw evidence of that in last year's local government elections between ward-based elections and PR-based elections. So I think the ideal for us, for South Africa, would be a mixed electoral system. If our electoral system was a constituency-based electoral system, then obviously there would be more accountability from members of parliament who are actually sent to parliament and are accountable to the communities who actually dispatch them to parliament from the different provinces of the country as well. But yes, absolutely. You know, at the moment, the problem that the ANC is facing is, obviously, it is a political party. It's a massive political party. The last time that we checked, just before Mangaung, the ANC had a membership of 1.2 million. Now, imagine managing a brand of that size. It's a huge, huge task. So, obviously, you're getting certain provinces, certain regions, certain members of the ANC unhappy, you know, with the direction that the party is taking. So, people will call impromptu press conferences. So in terms of the SG's duties, responsibilities as the CEO of the ANC, it's a, you know, it's a mammoth task for him to manage all of these different, you know, pushes and pulls, you know, from the regions, from the branches, from the different wards, you know, that actually make up this huge monolith called the African National Congress. Yeah, but you know, also a big problem in KZN. Obviously, there were threats against Dr. Makosi Khoza, but you know, obviously she's challenging it because the KZN leadership is also facing court challenges of its own. People are, you know, there's two factions within the province. Then also, you know, just taking you back to the ANC policy conference, a very important report that actually surfaced at that conference was the SG's report of the diagnostic report, and that diagnostic report says, you know what, we are the ANC, but there are massive problems. Those massive problems actually start at branch level, where those factions actually begin from. They, you know, they actually take root from that very branch. People are factionalized from branch level, and you know, the SG gave a very good example of you know, local leaders there not connecting with the masses that they are supposed to be leading. He says, you know, in terms of by-elections, you know, you look at national provincial leaders who are dispatched to those by-elections to campaign for the party. So the ANC has a lot of work to do between now and December, and I somehow think that the ANC will rectify a lot of those problems, you know, after December 2017.
Let me come to something else. Professor, before I come to you, I just want to go to Fana in KwaZulu-Natal. Fana, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
A very good afternoon to you. I just need to make one point around the issue of the conscience vote. What you are seeing is that your commentator and the analyst, everybody in South Africa thought that only ANC members were supposed to exercise the conscience vote. But what we are seeing is that opposition parties were bullying and pushing their members to vote for the motion. And they were not given that free will as well to vote for or against the motion. It was a complicity that they were supposed to actually vote for the motion. And no one even speaks about a possibility where one of the members of parliament from the DA or EFF voted against the motion. Everybody is assuming that all ANC members of parliament that voted, the 25 or 26 members voted for the motion and so on. There is no possibility other opposition parties could actually voted for that. And I think the media is also, from where I'm sitting, pushing a particular agenda here. Even some analysts, about 90%.
Fana, let's stick to what we are talking about. The vote of no confidence in Parliament. Let's not bring inside issues, the media. You are obfuscating the issues now. Professor Somoto Dafekedi, I wonder if you can respond to what Fana is saying, and in that response also talk about the ANC not being able to deal with dissensions at branch level, at provincial level. How are they going to deal with such dissensions at top level, at the top six, if any of the top six members have misstepped?
Actually, let me start by responding to Fana. Sometimes people make sweeping statements. I've been quite consistent in saying that the moral dilemma of the inconsistency of opposition parties, like in Mohale City, and the DA's own constitution saying that if you don't vote according to party line, it's only that when people get emotional and angry, then they start seeing enemy everywhere and not unpack what we have been saying. In fact, in one platform, the DA member was very angry when I said there are these inconsistencies. With us as analysts, we are merely a mirror. In the morning, if you have unsightly blemish in your eyes, you have a choice of wiping your face or taking a brick and break the mirror. That's all. And again, the other issue I wanted to add to the issue of reviewing the electoral system, the issue of party funding, it's also another elephant in the room, because the corrupting influence between business and politics, who is paying for which party, who is contributing to which candidates, is something that we ought to be transparent about. We can't use the Constitution a la carte, where you choose certain portions that fit you and you suddenly have no appetite for other areas. You take it in a constitutional democracy, in a rule of law, as it is. So that in itself, I think, to me, is very, very important. But ultimately, though, ANC's application of discipline virtually collapsed from 2005 when it became factionalized. The inconsistency in the application of discipline, if you are from a strong faction, if you are in a strong position, if you have a strong constituency, you are immunized from ANC discipline.
Well, if you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498 or tweet us at Rise Recourse. You can also send us an email and tell us what stories we can do here on Rise Recourse. Stay with us.
Prepared to give that guarantee that we should not steal from our people.
We bring your morning into perspective.
This is the reason they keep putting fees up. They're not getting enough money.
We'll make sure that you get the full story.
The police officers from specifically Moffat View Police Station, they support these brothels. What have you found upon your investigations on this matter?
I cannot deny those allegations.
And you can count on the weather team with expertise.
Join us live at 6 a.m. daily.
When I was passing the casino, I said, that edge came, said, just try, you never know. You might go home with 80,000, times 4 the amount that you have. And that stupid day, I lost all my money.
Never allow glamorous lifestyles to push you beyond your means.
The awakening moment was that 2007 when I left my children alone. I realized this is hurting me.
Ask for professional help if gambling is controlling you. Know when to stop.
I faced reality that what, for you there's no quick reach. So you just have to work hard. So it's gone.
For all your uplifting stories, catch Bupilong every Friday at 17:30.
The results of the vote by secret ballot are as follows. The total votes, 384. The yes, 177. Order, honorable members. Can I finish? The no, 198. And order. honorable members, I haven't finished. And there were 9 abstentions. And therefore, the motion of no confidence in the president is accordingly negatived.
While the results there by the Speaker of Parliament and some analysts have referred to that, especially one, your colleague Richard Calland, referred to that as a Pyrrhic victory.
Well, I do think that in boxing terms you'd say it's a split decision because there was something of a relief and consolation for the ruling party. It retained its president and the motion didn't go through, but they had seen a hemorrhage of its own membership voting against for the first time on that scale. At the same time, the opposition gained some consolation in the fact that they see so many of the ANC members presumably voting with it, and that it is inching closer by 21 votes to the ANC, which has 62% of electoral support. Take that from the election in 2009, when incrementally ANC has been reducing itself, and the dramatic drop in the metros, where almost 60% of the GDP is, where ANC seem to lose the majority. So technically speaking, if you have 198 in a parliament of 400, you are even reduced below 50% of the members of parliament. That in itself has to say something, more so when you consider the fact that the responses from the ANC was in defense of the party, not the person who was the subject of the vote of no confidence. So if they don't read the signs of time, then 2019 or 2024, they might find the rug lifted from their feet. But of course, that also depends on how the opposition behaves.
Ms. Dube, some ANC leaders have said openly that MPs who voted with the opposition parties in the motion of no confidence should face discipline. Isn't that in contravention of the ruling of the Constitutional Court, or isn't that in contempt of court?
Well, I would certainly argue that there would be sufficient legal grounds, at least to challenge from a legal perspective, for party members who are disciplined on the basis that they didn't toe the party line. Because, of course, the argument would be that they were simply upholding the Constitution and therefore they shouldn't be disciplined for abiding by their oath of office. But I wouldn't go so far as to suggest that it would be contempt of court, because these were words that the Chief Justice mentioned in the body of the judgment that he was reading out. It doesn't form part of the judgment itself. So in that sense, it simply serves as very strong, persuasive legal reasoning, but it's not necessarily an order of the court. So on that basis, it wouldn't be an entirely open and shut case of the political party being wrong in that instance. But of course, I would argue that, there are very strong grounds for a legal challenge. But I think ultimately this is really a matter which is about a failure of the stewards of our Constitution to live up to the Constitution, because the Constitution isn't a self-executing document. We rely on cabinet and we rely on organs of state as well as members of parliament to fulfill the Constitution and to make the Constitution a lived reality. So my overall concern is that it means that ordinary South Africans will question the legitimacy of the Constitution if seeming foolproof constitutional measures at the end of the day aren't wielding any results. I think that for me is the real concern.
Let's take this call from Pretoria. Good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
I'm Kantimane from Tshwane. Yes, firstly, I have to commend you for the panel that you put on board. I think they're very neutral and they give us actually what we want to hear. and for us to make a judgment. And I would say that I think the challenge, for example, regarding the whole secret ballot was about regarding the individual rather than the political party. The feeling was the ANC as an organization failed to take certain actions against the individual who did, and there are a number of occasions where one can actually refer back to the Nkandla, the Guptas, as well as the other issues that transpired, the Spurgeon Gordon's issues, but ANC failed to take those actions, and it's not because the ANC is an organization. We don't feel that the idea was to out the ANC, but rather the individual who's not actually aligned to the constitution of the country. And as a result of the fact of the...
Thank you, Kanti. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're just running out of time quickly, and a couple of things I want to put to the panel. One of them is the ink had hardly dried on the numbers that were read by the Speaker. The DA was already thinking of another motion to have Parliament dissolve. We know before this vote of no confidence that the EFF, Ronesh, had already started with a constitutional court challenge around the fact that the Parliament has not followed up on follow-up from the last constitutional judgment against the President of holding the President accountable.
Yeah, but Dumi, you know, September and October of this year is going to be extremely busy for our President, President Jacob Zuma. You know, there's the EFF case, a couple of cases being brought by the DA. Yeah, so it's going to be extremely busy, and you know, obviously everyone's going to be watching that space very closely. But you know, just to refresh the numbers again, you know, that secret ballot that was held last Tuesday, that vote was won by 198 to 177. But if we look deeper at the numbers, obviously we look at the 9 abstentions as well. You know, who were those 9 people who actually sat on that fence, you know, without actually saying yes or no? But then if you look at the previous motions of confidence, you know, the numbers have been going up. March 2015, the number was just 113. Then in March 2016, 99. And then November 2016, it was 126. So that major jump from 126 to 177 is a huge, huge confidence booster, especially for those opposition parties. But then this new motion that, you know, everyone's talking about, obviously, you know, brought on by the DA is, you know, dissolving Parliament. There is, you know, this particular section 46 of the South African Constitution, which says, you know, if the National Assembly is not constituted, you know, with regard to 350 members of the National Assembly, Parliament must be dissolved, you know, and fresh elections called. You know, I sincerely think that, you know, the DA was on a high after that secret ballot, but I think they've done a bit of brand damage to their brand, because all the other opposition parties like the EFF, the Freedom Front Plus, the ACDP, IFP, and COPE as well, they've all said, you know what, we respect, you know, what surfaced from the secret ballot on Tuesday, but we will not support this motion that you are proposing to dissolve Parliament. So I think the DA, you know, looking ahead, I think they did more damage to themselves, you know, calling for this different motion about dissolving Parliament, you know, using a possible loophole in the South African Constitution.
Professor Fadel, word to you. The one action that has been brought by the EFF could lead to the impeachment of the President. What's the difference between an impeachment and the vote of no confidence?
An impeachment, you have very specific charges you have, such as lying to Parliament or something wrong. Then the Parliament establishes a panel to try you on those specifics, and if you lose those, then you are impeached and you lose power. So that in itself is even privileges. It's very specific. A vote of no confidence could simply be a political process where people go, debate and vote. But this one is a more technical and legal process. But one last point I wanted to say is the one of saying, the DA saying that Parliament should dissolve itself broke the spirit of working together with the opposition parties, shows anxiety and ill timing which in itself, I agree with Ronesh, has actually damaged its own reputation because it has now simply taken its own path instead of working with the other parties and also reflecting on this. And the last point, they can simply resign themselves, then that number will actually be achieved.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will discuss these issues once again as we go along, especially the impeachment issue that I want us to take some time in discussing in future. This quotation from Martin Niyamola is on display on the permanent exhibition of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Niyamola was a Lutheran minister and early Nazi supporter who was later imprisoned for opposing Hitler's regime. He wrote, and I quote, "First they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. Then there was no one left to speak for me." This has been Rights and Recourse. This program, the views expressed in this program are not necessarily those of the SABC. This program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. From all of us in the studio, goodbye.